I remember the exact moment it all fell apart. My name's Rachel, I'm 32, and honestly, I should have known better. I was sitting on the old leather couch in the living room, my feet tucked beneath me, talking to my best friend Lisa about what we were going to wear for the next weekend's girls' night. It was supposed to be light, easy, fun, just a normal Saturday afternoon. But then I said it. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the glass of wine in my hand, or maybe I was just tired of pretending everything was perfect. I'd been doing that a lot lately, acting like the perfect wife, the perfect friend. But inside, I was unraveling. I think Lisa could tell. She always could. She knows me too well, and maybe I wanted her to know. Maybe I wanted someone to see through the charade. It's like, sometimes I wonder if he even likes me anymore, I said, half laughing, hoping Lisa would join in with the kind of supportive, knowing sympathy I craved. But the words hung in the air too long. I caught the shadow in her eyes before she could cover it up. And then, from somewhere in the back of the room, I heard the sound of the front door opening. I turned around, expecting to see Adam walk in, and I couldn't have known how much everything would change in that 1 second. When he stepped into the living room, he didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on the floor as he removed his jacket. That wasn't like him, not at all. Adam was always the kind of guy who looked you in the eye when he came into a room, who greeted you with a smile, even if he was upset. But today, it felt different. He didn't say a word, didn't even acknowledge my presence. And something inside me twisted, a cold knot in my stomach. Lisa glanced at me, her eyebrows raised, and then she quickly stood up. "I'll just go check on the kids," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched, a little too nervous. She could sense it too. Something had shifted, but I had no idea how much. Adam didn't even look up when I called his name. "Hey, Adam," I said, my voice shaking just a little, betraying my nerves. Still, he didn't answer. He didn't even seem to register that I'd spoken. I told myself I was imagining things. He was just tired. He'd had a long day at work. I pushed myself off the couch, walking over to him, but my feet felt heavier with every step, and when I reached out to touch his arm, he pulled away just slightly. "Adam, what's wrong?" I asked, but he only sighed and shrugged. "You wouldn't understand." His voice was cold, and it hit me like a slap. I froze. The words stung, but I was used to them. Or at least I thought I was. I never expected it would hurt this much, though. He hadn't even looked at me while he said it. "Excuse me?" I tried to hide the tremor in my voice, but it broke through anyway. My heart was racing now, each beat heavy in my chest. He'd never spoken to me like this. Never. Not even when we fought. Not even when he was angry. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream at him for being so distant. But I didn't. I stood there, motionless, frozen by the realization that this wasn't a petty argument. This wasn't something we'd get over in a few hours. This was something deeper, something broken. "You can't just say things like that," I said, my voice quieter now, shaking with a mix of frustration and confusion. Adam just turned, away from me, heading into the kitchen without a word. He didn't even try to explain himself. I could hear the refrigerator door open, the clink of ice in a glass, but I couldn't bring myself to move. My body was frozen, like my feet had been cemented to the floor. I wanted to ask him what I'd done wrong. What had changed? What had happened to the man I married? But I didn't. Instead, I stayed standing there, a rush of panic and self-doubt, clawing at me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't understand. It wasn't until I saw him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone without even noticing I was there, that I realized something was very wrong. Something was broken, and I had no idea how to fix it. And as the silence between us stretched, I thought back to the joke. Was it the joke? Was it my stupid comment that had set this all off? "I don't know what's happening," I whispered under my breath, but Adam didn't hear me. He was lost in the screen of his phone, and for the first time in years I felt completely, utterly alone. What had I done to deserve this? What had changed between us? But as the question lingered in the air, I realized something. I hadn't asked the most important question yet. What had I said that was so wrong? It was too late to take it back now, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself that I was just overthinking things. Adam was probably just tired. That was it, right? He worked hard all week and maybe he didn't feel like talking. I'd been there before. But no matter how much I tried to reassure myself, the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing minute. I wanted to approach him, to fix this, but something held me back. I'd never seen him like this before, so distant, so closed off. Normally, he would have at least acknowledged me, even if he was upset. But now it was as though I was invisible to him. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done something terrible, something unforgivable. But what? What was it? My mind raced through every interaction, every moment, trying to figure out what had caused this shift. And then it hit me. The joke, my stupid comment, the one I had thought was harmless. I had been joking, really. I mean, it wasn't even that bad. I had said something about how sometimes I wondered if Adam even liked me anymore, and I had meant it as a light-hearted remark. But I realized now, looking at him, at the way he refused to look at me, that maybe it hadn't been so innocent. After all, maybe it had hurt him. Maybe it had made him feel like I didn't appreciate him. I wanted to call out to him, to ask if that was it, if that comment had somehow made him feel like I didn't care. But every time I opened my mouth, the words felt stuck. I couldn't bring myself to say them out loud. What if I was wrong? What if that wasn't it at all? What if I had been right all along? Maybe he just didn't care about me anymore, and this was his way of showing it. I needed him to talk to me. I needed to hear him say something, anything, that would make this feel less like a chasm between us and more like something I could fix. But as the minutes dragged on, I realized he wasn't going to talk. He wasn't going to give me anything. And the fear that had been gnawing at me for weeks now, maybe longer, started to settle in. I was losing him. My thoughts began to spiral. The guilt, the shame, the fear, they all swirled together, creating a vortex I couldn't escape. What had I done? Was it the joke? Had I been too self-deprecating, too vulnerable in front of our friends? Had he finally had enough of me? Maybe it wasn't just that one comment. Maybe it was the years of little things, the quiet moments when I'd needed him, and he hadn't been there. Maybe it was the way I distanced myself too, hiding behind my sarcasm and humor instead of talking to him like I should have. Maybe it wasn't just the joke. Maybe I was the one who had pushed him away, little by little, without even realizing it. I couldn't even bring myself to face him right now. He was sitting at the kitchen table, his face illuminated by the cold glow of his phone, and I couldn't look at him. I couldn't make myself do it. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. "Adam," I whispered, just barely above a breath. He didn't respond. I felt the sting in my chest as I stared at his back, wishing for him to turn around, to look at me, to say anything. But he didn't, and it was like a punch to the gut. I walked toward him, my feet unsure and heavy. "Adam, can we talk?" Nothing. I stopped just a few feet away from him, unsure of what to do, what to say. My hands were trembling, and I wiped them on my jeans in an attempt to steady myself. His eyes flickered up from the phone, but only for a second before they returned, to the screen. He didn't speak, didn't acknowledge me, and the silence stretched on, suffocating me. My heart was racing now. I didn't know what to do, what to say. I wanted to apologize, but I wasn't even sure what I was apologizing for. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that I didn't deserve this. But the words caught in my throat. I felt so small, so insignificant in that moment. I wanted to explain myself, to tell him I hadn't meant to hurt him. But I couldn't even gather the courage to say it. I wanted to hold him, to make everything better, but I felt like I was losing my grip on him. "Adam," I said again, more forcefully this time. my voice trembling with desperation. This time, he finally looked up at me, but his expression was blank. His eyes were cold, unreadable. And in that moment, I saw everything. How far away he had become, how distant he was from me. It was like looking at a stranger. "Can you just tell me what's going on?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why are you acting like this? What did I do?" He let out a slow, frustrated sigh, and then he put his phone down on the table. "You don't get it, Rachel," he said quietly, his voice low and almost pained. "You never get it." I flinched at the words, like a slap. What did he mean? What had I done that was so wrong? "Get what?" I demanded, my own anger starting to surface, mixed with confusion and hurt. "What are you talking about?" He stood up slowly, running a hand through his hair, and finally, he looked at me. But his gaze wasn't filled with the warmth I once knew. There was something else in it, something darker, something filled with hurt. "You really don't get it, do you?" He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "That comment you made, it wasn't funny, Rachel. It wasn't a joke. You said you wonder if I even like you anymore. And maybe I'm just tired of pretending everything's okay when it isn't." My breath caught in my throat, and everything inside me froze. He wasn't just hurt. He was angry. But more than that, he was broken. "I didn't mean it like that," I said quickly, my voice faltering. "It was just a joke. I didn't—" "You think I don't notice?" Adam's voice was sharper now. "I notice. I notice when you make jokes about us. About me. It's like you're constantly putting me down, and I'm supposed to laugh it off. But I can't anymore, Rachel. I can't just laugh it off." I stood there speechless. He was hurting. He had been hurting for a long time, and I didn't see it. I never saw it. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice cracking. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw Adam's eyes soften. Just a little. But the damage was done. The wall was up, and I wasn't sure how to break it down. I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me, suffocating me. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. It was like everything I had known about my marriage was crumbling, piece by piece, and I was too late to stop it. Adam's face softened for just a moment, but it wasn't the softness I wanted. It wasn't the reassurance that everything would be okay. No, this was something different, something that hurt more than I could bear. I stood there in stunned silence, unable to process the depth of what he had just said. It wasn't about the joke anymore. It wasn't just about one moment, one comment. It was about everything that had been building between us, everything I had ignored or dismissed as unimportant. I had made jokes to cover up the cracks in our marriage, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And now, in that silence, I realized that Adam had seen through it all. He had felt it too. But what was I supposed to do now? How could I fix this? I had no idea how to make it right. I felt small, helpless, like I had been caught in a lie I didn't even know I was telling. "I never meant to make you feel that way," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. My throat was tight, my words choking me as they left my mouth. I didn't know you felt like this." He sighed again, a sound heavy with years of frustration. "I know you didn't mean it that way, Rachel, but that's the problem. You never mean it. You never think about how your words land, how they make me feel. You just say whatever comes to your mind, and I'm left to pick up the pieces." His words hit me harder than any slap could. I had always been the one to make jokes, to keep things light. I had used humor as a shield to protect myself, to avoid dealing with the deeper issues that I didn't know how to face. But now, I was seeing the toll it had taken on him. I was seeing how my need for laughter had become his burden, I don't know what you want me to say, I said, my voice trembling. I don't know how to fix this. I don't want to lose you. Adam's eyes softened again, but the distance between us was still there, lingering like a shadow. I don't want to lose you either, he said quietly, almost regretfully. But I need you to see me, Rachel. I need you to see me the way I see you. I'm not just some joke to laugh at. I'm your husband, and I need you to understand that. I felt the tears welling up, but I forced them back, not wanting him to see me break. But inside, I was falling apart. I had never been good at this, at talking about feelings, at being vulnerable. I had always kept my emotions hidden, buried beneath layers of sarcasm and humor. And now, in the face of Adam's hurt, I realized how much damage I had caused by keeping those walls up. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I'm sorry for everything, for not seeing you, for not understanding. He looked at me for a long moment, his gaze soft but guarded. I could tell he wanted to believe me, wanted to forgive me, but I could feel the walls between us, too strong to break down in one conversation. I don't know if you understand, Rachel, he said, his voice quiet, almost resigned. I don't know if you can, but I need space. I need time to figure out if this is something we can fix. I nodded, my throat tight with unshed tears. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to make him believe me, how to convince him that I could change, that I wanted to change. But as he walked past me, heading toward the bedroom without another word, I knew something fundamental had shifted, and I didn't know if we could ever go back. The silence in the room was deafening as I stood there, alone with my thoughts. I had never felt so lost. I didn't know how to fix this, didn't know how to undo the damage I had done. I had been too caught up in my own insecurities, in my own need for validation, that I hadn't stopped to consider how Adam felt, how much I had taken him for granted. I sank down onto the couch, my hands trembling as I buried my face in my palms. This wasn't just about a joke anymore. This was about a pattern, about years of neglect, emotional neglect, and now I was paying the price. I loved him. I loved him so much. But love wasn't enough, was it? Not when I had failed. To truly see him, to truly listen to him. I could say sorry all I wanted, but could I really change? Could I really fix this? The question lingered in the air, unanswered, as the silence between us stretched on, and I didn't know how to fill it. The night stretched on, a quiet abyss that swallowed any hope of resolution. Adam didn't come back downstairs. I don't think he even came out of the bedroom. I could hear the soft rustle of sheets, the occasional creak of the bed frame as he moved, but that was it. No words, no attempts to make things right, just silence. And I sat there, on the couch, the weight of my own regret pushing me deeper into the cushions. I kept replaying the conversation in my head over and over. Maybe if I had said something different, maybe if I had tried harder to explain myself, things would have gone differently. But I couldn't fix it now, could I? The damage had been done. The walls had gone up, and I was left on the outside, desperate to find a way back in. I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to close my eyes and let the weight of everything settle on me even more. But exhaustion crept in, heavy and suffocating. I could feel the pull of sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was Adam's face. His eyes, cold and distant, like I was a stranger. The words echoed in my head. You never get it. I stood up, pacing the living room in the dark, the only light coming from the soft glow of the streetlights outside the window. I didn't know what to do with myself. I could hear him breathing, softly upstairs, but there was no chance of reconciliation tonight. There was no apology that would take back the way he had looked at me, the way he had spoken to me. I had hurt him, and in return, I had hurt myself. This wasn't just about the joke anymore. It was about all the things I had ignored over the years. The way I had used humor to avoid real conversations. The way I had let him slip through my fingers without realizing it. And that terrified me. I wasn't sure when things started to change between us, when the intimacy began to fade. Maybe it was gradual, like the slow erosion of a cliffside, tiny shifts that went unnoticed until there was nothing left to hold on to. Or maybe it was sudden. One moment we were fine, and the next, we weren't. All I knew now was that I was standing at the edge of something I wasn't sure how to cross. I walked to the kitchen, my steps heavy with the weight of my thoughts, and I poured myself a glass of water, even though I didn't really want it. I just needed something to do, something to keep my hands busy, to keep my mind from spiraling. Even further, I tried to think about what I could do to make it right, but I couldn't come up with a single solution. There was no magical phrase I could say that would fix this. No grand gesture that would make him look at me the way he used to. I had pushed him too far. I had made him feel unimportant, unseen, like a joke in my life instead of a partner. The worst part was, I wasn't even sure how to apologize. I had never been good at that. I was always the one who deflected, who hid behind humor or sarcasm when I should have been open, when I should have been vulnerable. But now I was stuck, trapped in my own failure, unable to reach out, unable to find the right words. I leaned against the counter, the cool surface pressing into my palms as I stared into the empty glass in front of me. My heart felt like it was beating in time with the ticking clock, each second dragging on, stretching the distance between us even further. Was it over? Was it too late for us? I didn't have an answer, and that uncertainty gnawed at me, made the silence even harder to bear. Finally, I dragged myself back upstairs. The house felt too quiet, like the silence had filled every corner and every room. When I reached the bedroom door, I paused. I didn't want to face him like this. Not after everything that had been said. I didn't know if I could face him at all. But I had to try, didn't I? I opened the door slowly, almost afraid of what I would find. Adam was lying in bed, facing away from me, the soft rise and fall of his back the only indication that he was still awake. He didn't turn when I entered. He didn't even acknowledge my presence. The air between us felt thick, suffocating. I hesitated, unsure of what to say, how to say it. "Adam," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the stillness. I reached out, my hand trembling as I touched the edge of the bed, just a few inches from his back. He didn't move. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking as the words escaped me. "I'm sorry for everything, for making you feel like you weren't enough, for making you feel invisible." I waited for a response, any response, but nothing came. The silence was deafening, suffocating. "I never meant to hurt you," I added, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I see now that I have, and I don't know how to fix it, but I want to. I want to make things right." Still, he didn't say anything, and as the minutes dragged on, my heart sank further, realizing that this wasn't something I could fix in a moment. I slowly turned and walked away from the bed, my steps heavy as I headed back to the living room. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even sit still. The weight of everything hung around me, clinging to me like a shadow. I didn't know where this was going, but I knew that I was teetering on the edge of something I might not be able to save. Was this the end? I didn't know. All I knew was that the person I loved, the person I thought I understood, was slipping, further and further away. And I didn't know if I could reach him in time. The next morning felt like a continuation of the silence, stretching out longer than I thought possible. I woke up early as usual, but there was no warmth in the room. No shared laughter or soft morning greetings, just a heavy, oppressive quiet that seemed to hang in the air, thick and suffocating. Adam was already gone, probably at work, but I wasn't sure. He didn't say goodbye, didn't leave any indication of where he was going. It didn't matter, though. The absence of his presence in the house was the loudest thing. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the cup of coffee I'd poured myself, but I had no appetite. My stomach was a knot, tight and uncomfortable, a constant reminder of the distance between us. I thought about texting him, maybe reaching out to bridge the gap, but the moment I touched my phone, doubt crept in. What if he didn't want to talk? What if I was just making things worse by intruding on his space? What if this silence was his way of telling me he needed more than I could give? I set the phone down. It felt like a betrayal of my own instincts, but I couldn't shake the feeling that any more words from me would just push him further away. The day passed in a blur, the clock ticking slowly, each minute dragging on like an eternity. I kept myself busy with mundane tasks, laundry, cleaning, anything to distract myself from the growing ache inside. But nothing worked. I kept thinking about Adam, about us, and what had happened. My mind kept returning to the joke, the innocent thing I thought would pass without consequence. But it hadn't. It had been the catalyst for everything, hadn't it? That one offhand remark that had left him feeling unseen, unappreciated. Was I really that thoughtless? That selfish? I had to admit it. I had been. So wrapped up in my own need for validation, for attention, that I hadn't even considered the impact my words might have on him. I hadn't thought about how my constant jokes might have undermined him, made him feel small, less important than the punchline of my joke. I was so wrapped in these thoughts that I didn't hear the door open. But when I heard the familiar sound of Adam's footsteps, my heart gave a small leap, then sank almost immediately. He had come home, but there was no warmth in his arrival. No soft, "Hey," or "How was your day?" He walked in like a stranger, his jacket hanging loosely from his shoulder, and he didn't look at me. Not once. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I even had the right to say anything. But I couldn't let this continue. We couldn't continue like this. "Adam," I said, my voice faltering as I stood from the couch, hoping to break the tension. He glanced at me briefly, his face impassive. "What's up?" His words were neutral, but I could hear the distance in them, the space he had created between us. I don't know what to do anymore," I said, my voice breaking as I struggled to find the right words. "I don't know how to make things right. I don't know how to fix this." He didn't respond immediately, just hung his coat on the hook by the door and walked past me toward the kitchen. He didn't even look at me when he passed. I could feel the sharp sting of rejection in the air. "Please, Adam," I said, my voice growing more desperate. "Just talk to me." He stopped at the counter, but he didn't face me. He was quiet for a long time, and I couldn't tell if he was processing what I had said or if he was just trying to figure out what to do with all the hurt he felt. "I don't know what you want from me, Rachel," he said, his voice low, the frustration leaking through. "What do you expect me to say? I've been telling you for months now, years, even, that I feel like I'm not enough, that you don't see me. That I'm just your emotional punching bag, and you think a sorry is going to fix it? It's not that simple." I felt my stomach twist. The words hit me like a blow. I had never realized how much he had been carrying, how much he had been hiding behind his silence. I had always thought we were okay, that everything would work itself out. But I had been blind. I had been so wrapped up in my own fears and insecurities that I didn't stop to see how much he was hurting. "I never wanted to hurt you," I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of everything I was feeling. "I didn't mean to make you feel invisible. I don't know how to explain it, but I never saw how badly I was hurting you." Adam let out a frustrated sigh, running his hand through his hair, but he didn't turn to face me. "Well, maybe it's because you've never tried to see me, Rachel," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. "You've been so wrapped up in your own world that you've ignored everything that's been happening in mine. And now, when I've had enough, you're suddenly trying to fix it. You can't fix this. Not with a few words." His words were like a slap, and I flinched. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall, not yet. Not when I was still so unsure of what I had even done wrong. "I know I've messed up," I said, my voice shaking. "I know I've hurt you, but I want to change. I don't want to keep going like this, Adam. I don't want to lose you." There was a long pause, a silence that felt like it lasted an eternity. When Adam finally spoke, His voice was softer, though still tinged with frustration. "I don't know if you can change, Rachel," he said quietly. "I don't know if you even want to. Maybe I've been trying to convince myself that you do, but I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure I can keep waiting for something that might never happen." And those words hit me harder than anything else he had said. It wasn't just about the joke anymore. It was about everything that had led up to this moment, about how I had failed him, how I had let him down. "I'm sorry," I whispered again, my heart breaking as I felt the weight of his disappointment. But there was nothing left to say. Not right now. We were both too broken, too lost in our own pain to fix this in one conversation. I could feel him slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The days that followed felt like a slow burn, each one stretching out painfully, filled with empty space and muted conversations. I couldn't help but feel the distance between us growing wider. Adam came home, but he was a ghost in the house. He was physically there, but emotionally, he was light years away. We didn't argue anymore, but there was no tenderness either. No connection, no warmth. I found myself watching him more closely, trying to catch glimpses of the man I once knew, the man I had fallen in love with. But all I saw were his walls, so much higher now, impenetrable. I wasn't sure what I expected to see. Maybe a flicker of the old Adam, the one who would laugh at my jokes and pull me into an embrace, the one who would look at me like I was the only person in the room. But that Adam was gone, buried beneath the weight of my mistakes. I tried, God knows I tried. I made small gestures, like leaving little notes on the kitchen counter or making his favorite dinner. I thought maybe if I could show him, in my own way, that I was trying to change, maybe he'd soften. Maybe he'd see that I didn't want this to be the end. But every time, he just accepted the gestures with a nod or a quiet, "Thanks," never truly engaging, never really seeing me. It was like he was waiting for me to prove that I was capable of change. Waiting for me to show him that I could stop being the woman who made everything into a joke, who avoided the hard conversations. But I wasn't sure how to do that. I wasn't sure how to break the walls down when he wouldn't even look at me. One night, after another quiet dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront him. I had to know if this was just a rough patch or if we were truly over. "Adam," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and fear. "We can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. Please, just talk to me. Tell me what you're thinking." He looked up from his plate, his eyes briefly meeting mine before quickly darting away. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't say anything, that maybe he was too tired to fight. But then, he set his fork down with a soft clink and exhaled slowly, like he had been holding his breath for far too long. "I don't know what you want me to say, Rachel," he said quietly. His voice was tired, almost resigned. "I've already told you how I feel. I don't know if you understand what's at stake here. It's not just about the joke anymore. It's about everything." Everything I've been feeling, everything I've been holding in for so long. "I know," I whispered, the words feeling hollow. "But I'm trying, Adam. I'm really trying." He shook his head, frustration creeping into his tone. "Trying isn't enough anymore. It's not just about trying. It's about change. Real change. I need to know that I'm not just some afterthought in your life, that I'm not just the punchline of your jokes. I need to know that you see me, that you really see me." His words hit me like a fist to the stomach. I had been so focused on my own hurt, my own guilt, that I hadn't stopped to think about how he felt. How long had he been carrying this? How long had he been waiting for me to change, to wake up and see him for who he really was? "I see you," I said, the words coming out raw, desperate. "I do. I don't know how to fix it." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I saw a flicker of something. Anger, yes, but also pain. So much pain. And I realized then that this wasn't just about a joke or a comment. This was about years of neglect, of misunderstandings, of me not seeing him, not valuing him the way he deserved. "You can't fix it in a day," he said softly, his voice breaking just a little. "I don't know if you can fix it at all. I don't know if I can believe that things will be different." His words crushed me. I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, to tell him that I was capable of change. But I knew, deep down, that words weren't enough anymore. I had spent so long hiding behind them, using humor and deflection as a shield, that I had forgotten how to truly connect. And now, the silence between us was unbearable. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "But I can't change the past. I can only try to be better, try to show you that I can be the person you need me to be." He stood up from the table then, pushing his chair back with a sharp scrape. He didn't look at me as he walked toward the door. "I'm not asking for perfection, Rachel," he said, his back to me now. "I'm just asking for a chance, a real chance, but I don't know if I can keep waiting around to see if that happens." And with that, he was gone, walking out the door, leaving me alone in the empty room, surrounded by the weight of my own failures. I had no answers, no way to fix what I had broken. All I had were my regrets, my desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, I could turn this around. But as I sat there in the quiet, staring at the empty chair across from me, I realized that hope wasn't enough anymore. I had been hoping for a chance, for something to change, but maybe Adam's heart had already made up its mind. And that scared me more than anything. Because if it was too late, if I had already lost him, then I didn't know who I was anymore. The days blurred into one another, each one feeling like a repeat of the last. Adam continued to come home, but it felt like we were both just going through the motions. There were no more arguments, no more sharp words exchanged, but the absence of everything that used to be there, the laughter, the small touches, the knowing looks, was unbearable. It was like we were two strangers living in the same house, caught in an endless loop of silence that neither of us knew how to escape. I kept telling myself that I would make things right, that somehow I could show him that I was